Welcome to the Folktale Project. This is Dan Schulz. This week, in honor of Independence Day here in the United States, we're reading 3 tales from Charles Skinner's Myths and Legends of Our Own Land. Our first story takes place in New York, and it's a bit of a ghost story, but it's also a tale of an island that, well, really is no longer associated with such tales. It's the story of Ellis Island, or, as we'll soon find out, Gibbet Island. This is Charles Skinner's The Party from Gibbet Island. Ellis Island in New York Harbor once bore the name of Gibbet Island, because pirates and mutineers were hanged there in chains. During the times when it was devoted to this fell purpose, there stood in Communipaw the Wild Goose Tavern, where Dutch burghers resorted to smoke, drink Hollands, and grow fat, wise, and sleepy in each other's company. The plague of this inn was Jan Jost van der Skamp, a nephew of the landlord who frequently alarmed the patrons of the house by putting powder in their pipes and attaching briars beneath their horses' tails, and who naturally turned pirate when he became older, taking with him to sea his boon companion, an ill-disposed, ill-favored blackamoor named Pluto, who had been employed about the tavern. When the landlord died, Van der Skamp possessed himself of this property, fitted it up with plunder, and at intervals he had his gang ashore, such a crew of singing, swearing, drinking, gaming devils as Communipaw had never seen the like of. Yet the residents could not summon activity enough to stop the goings-on that made the Wild Goose a disgrace to their village. The British authorities, however, caught 3 of the swashbucklers and strung them up on Gibbet Island, and things that went on badly in Communipaw after that went on with quiet and secrecy. The pirate and his henchmen were returning to the tavern one night after a visit to a rakish-looking vessel in the offing, when a squall broke in such force as to give their skiff a leeway to the place of executions. As they rounded that lonely reef, a creaking noise overhead caused Van der Skamp to look up, and he could not repress a shudder as he saw the bodies of his 3 messmates, their rags fluttering and their chains grinding in the wind.
"Don't you want to see your friends?"
sneered Pluto.
"You, who are never afraid of the living men, what do you fear from the dead?"
"Nothing," answered the pirate. Then, lugging forth his bottle, he took a long pull at it, and holding it toward the dead felons, he shouted, "Here's fair weather to you, my lads in the wind, and if you should be walking the rounds tonight, come in to supper." A clatter of bones and a creak of chains sounded like a laugh. It was midnight when the boat pulled in at Communipaw, and as the storm continued, Van der Skamp, drenched to the skin, made quick time to the Wild Goose. As he entered, a sound of revelry overhead smote his ear, and, being no less astonished than in need of cordials, he hastened upstairs and flung open the door. A table stood there, furnished with jugs and pipes and cans, and by light of candles that burned as blue as brimstone could be seen the 3 gallows birds from Gibbet Island, with halters on their necks, clinking their tankards together and trolling forth a drinking song. Starting back with affright as the corpses hailed him with lifted arms and turned their fishy eyes on him, Van der Skamp slipped at the door and fell headlong to the bottom of the stairs. Next morning he was found there by the neighbors, dead to a certainty, and was put away in the Dutch churchyard at Bergen on the Sunday following. As the house was rifled and deserted by its occupants, it was hinted that the Negro had betrayed his master to his fellow buccaneers, and that he, Pluto, was no other than the devil in disguise. But he was not, for his skiff was seen floating bottom up in the bay soon after, and his drowned body lodged among the rocks at the foot of the pirate's gallows. For a long time afterwards, the island was regarded as a place that required purging with bell, book, and candle, for shadows were reported there and faint lights that shot into the air, and to this day, with the great immigrant station on it, and crowds going and coming all the time, the battery boatmen prefer not to row around it at night, for they are likely to see the shades of the soldier and his mistress who were drowned off the place one windy night, when the girl was aiding the fellow to escape confinement in the guardhouse, to say nothing of Vanderkamp and his felons. And that is The Party from Gibbet Island, a story about Ellis Island, and a side of Ellis Island that I, as someone who lived and grew up in New York, didn't know. And that's quite a rare sight, to have a story about a place that we think we know so well, and we find out we don't really know it at all. This is Dan Scholes for the Folktale Project. Don't forget that you can subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play, Overcast, anywhere you like to get your podcasts. You can follow us on Twitter at Folktale Project. You can find us on Auto Radio, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, Spotify, anywhere you like to listen. And you can always head over to folktaleproject.com, where you'll find a new story waiting for you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. As always, thank you so much for listening.